All right, welcome everybody to the ATB NFL Live Show Week 3 edition here. We have Tony and Vance with me joining to me today. We're going to talk about all the different games going on, a few different things going on in the NFL right now. We're actually going to start with the team that's near and dear to Vance's heart here, with the Cincinnati Bengals coming off a brutal loss to the Cowboys without Dak Prescott. I want to jump right into this today, guys. What do you think's going on with the Bengals? As a Steelers fan, it's not bad for me to see that, but I'm also just very confused about it, and it's a lot's going on with it that I really don't truly understand. I have my own thoughts on it, but obviously with Vance being our Bengals guy, let's jump to you, Vance. What do you think about the Bengals? What's going on with them? What needs to change for them to start winning again?
Well, I think it's a lot of it is really a perfect storm, even extending back to the offseason. Famously, Joe Burrow had surgery. He missed all of the preseason. He missed most of practice because he couldn't really do anything. He had appendix surgery. So he was always probably going to have a little bit of rust coming in. And then the offensive line also, four new starters on the line. One of them a rookie, and other than him, they didn't really get much work in the preseason either. So you've got a rusty offensive line. Lyle Collins has struggled at right tackle. He's dealing with a back issue and has been, so his health has been in question. So they're coming into the season with some rust at the absolute best. And then they open their first two games with T.J. Watt and Micah Parsons as the first two pass rushers they see, and that is obviously not going well. Those guys have absolutely blown the line up. Burrow has looked rusty, but he's also looked like he's seeing a little bit of ghosts, and that's been a concern for Burrow since he's been here. He's being sacked at a ridiculous pace, and he is starting more and more to pull the ball down and run and drop his eyes before he has to. Sometimes you can find pics or videos on Twitter posted all over the place of pockets where he really probably could have stayed another second or so and maybe got a throw off, and he's starting to rush things. So there's some concern with that, and that has obviously limited the offense. You're talking about an offense that came into this season with a what I would assume most people would consider a top 7 or 8 quarterback, a top 10 running back, and the best receiver room in all of football, and they're averaging 18.5 points per game in 2 weeks. And the offenses just look disjointed. Now, the other part to blame, at least in my opinion, is going to be the coaching staff, and it has to come back on them, as they seem completely unprepared for the issues that they knew they were going to be facing. They knew the offensive line. They were why the offensive line wasn't on the field in the preseason. They knew Burrow had surgery, and they still are running the same exact offense they ran last year, which was very successful, obviously, but they aren't prepared for the differences in this season. And the biggest one that they are facing is a lot of cover 2 defenses, and they seemed unprepared. Burrow admitted that they were not expecting so much cover 2. And I don't know why that would be if you're a coaching staff. Obviously, last year they absolutely torched single high looks all season long and led the league in big plays. Why would defenses not adjust to that? And they did not adjust back, and they haven't adjusted yet. Maybe they will. They start to face a little bit lesser pass rushers. They're not seeing the league's top 2 to 3 pass rushers this week, so maybe that helps somewhat. But the coaching staff has to figure some things out. They don't use play action. They don't really use a lot of misdirection. The blame for that falls on the coaching staff, in my opinion. I've heard Burrow doesn't like to do play action because he doesn't like his back to the defense. But that doesn't matter. Like Burrow has to adjust. The coaches have to adjust. They're going to have to use some misdirection, some schemes to get some guys open, figure out ways to get the ball in Jamar Chase's hands, run play action, whatever they need to do. But right now, the coaching staff doesn't have any answers, and we're watching Joe Burrow get hit over and over and over and over again. He's going to have to adjust his style of play. Somewhat at least, and try to protect himself. The coaching staff's going to have to try to protect himself, or we're going to see more and more issues, and you start to enter the danger zone. And I don't want to jump the gun on this because he's obviously in year 3 and he's been very successful, but you start to enter territory where he could be Joe Montana or he could be David Carr. And with the amount of hits he's taken, it's going to be David Carr at some point. He just can't continue. I don't care how good he is and how tough he is, and we've seen him be a tough guy and do a lot of extraordinary things on the field, but a man can only get hit so many times before his career just starts to become jeopardized.
Absolutely. I think I totally agree with everything that you've brought up so far. I definitely have a few things that I have as far as thoughts. They're pretty similar, but I want to go to Tony. What do you think is going on here? Do you mostly agree with Vance? Do you think that there's something more to it other than what he talked about? Or
I think Vance summed it up pretty perfectly. It's not just one issue, but it can be traced back to the coaching staff from the start. Like they had all the knowledge going into this season, and they still chose not to really prepare. At least it doesn't look like they prepared much. I do think Burrow owns some of those sacks himself. I
Oh,
think it's
absolutely.
a nature of his play style. Part of what makes him so great, truthfully, like, and you see that with other quarterbacks as well, is their desire to extend plays and then go hit that jump ball guy in T. Higgins or Jamar Chase for a big touchdown. We saw a lot of that last year, and so those aren't the most sticky plays year over year. Like there is some inherent variance in plays like that, and right now things are looking down. Like Vance said, they have faced probably the two best edge rushers in the NFL these first 2 weeks, so I do expect things to come back positively for them. I almost expect a big bounce back today, just because they're Carl Lawson isn't Micah Parsons. He's not TJ Watt. So he's not really going to do the same amount of damage that those guys could do. And I think they're going to be fine, but because of this 0-2 start, it's going to be hard to make the playoffs in a pretty loaded AFC. It's the division is tough. The Browns, oddly enough, are I think probably pacing the division right now. So they probably can't win the division with an 0-2 start, as crazy as that is to say this early in the season. But that wild card spot, it's within reach. It's just they're in a hole right now, and they got to dig themselves out of it.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing, and you touched on it in advance, is the coaching staff. You can tell that they were not prepared for teams to play them this differently, right? And I think that's an indictment on Zach Taylor and his staff. We even talked about. I know you've tweeted about it, Vance. I've talked about it too. The fact that they went to the Super Bowl last year, as great as it is for the fan base, as great as it was to watch for you guys, I'm sure. I think it almost may end up hurting this team long term because Zach Taylor's leash is only going to get longer than it was prior to that. And if he doesn't really shape up soon, he might still be gone, and that might ultimately be good for you guys. But he's going to have more benefit of the doubt than he would have had if they would have just maybe lost in the first round or whatever else may have happened last year. Because he made it to the Super Bowl, now he's going to have the opportunity, maybe even if he doesn't deserve it, depending on how long this lasts for, to right the ship, and it may ultimately hurt this team long term. And I think the fact that they haven't been able to or didn't expect to deal with more cover two looks like you said it's the same thing that happened to the Chiefs early last year, right? Like they knew, okay, we're not going to let Mahomes beat us deep. We're not going to let Tyreek Hill get over the top of us. We're going to make them play small ball. We're going to make them do this stuff that they haven't really had to do before. And now that they're asking the Bengals to do that, they have the weapons to do it. I mean, you can
Sure.
utilize Tyler Boyd better. You can utilize Higgins in the middle of the field more. He's a big body guy. You don't have to use him down the sidelines as much. Chase, even though his best trait isn't route running, it's still a good trait at this point, even in his young career. You can use him in more creative ways. They need to figure out how to do it and do it now. They can't afford to go 0-3, 0-4 in an AFC like this and expect to make the playoffs again. And we'll talk about the picks later, but so far, Zach Taylor has given me no reason to believe he can adjust to this. And if the Jets bring out the same look, even if they do win, I think it's going to be a way tougher game than it has to be. I mean, this team lost to them last year, and that was with Mike White at quarterback. So there's no reason to just assume this is going to be a win. So it's going to be interesting to follow. I definitely am curious, from my end of things as well. Not that I can say much with my Steelers team right now, but we don't have to talk about them too much. We are going to talk about that game a little bit, but before we talk about that, I do want to move into our second topic of the day, and it's going to be related to Tony's team here at the Bills and who they're facing today. Tua Tagovailoa coming off of definitely the best game of his career by a significant margin against the Ravens last week. Thank you guys for that, by the way. If you're any Miami fans watching right now, I appreciate that one. But do we think that this is the time that Tua can, with the injuries the Bills are facing, with how well he played last week in this offense he's now playing in, can he finally get over the hump and actually beat this Bills team and put the Dolphins in position to maybe, even if they don't win the division, be a true playoff caliber football team this year? We'll go to Tony first.
Yeah, I think yes, the Dolphins are more for real than they are fake, but I think you do have to dig deeper than that. It's going to be a long season, and there's a lot of good teams in the AFC. We've seen 8 quarters of play out of the Miami Dolphins this year. 7 of them were pretty much the same exact level of play, and that was a middling team that just had to really get by. They were losing pretty bad to the Ravens, and then we saw one just truly elite quarter where everything gelled. Tua was on top of his game. The receivers were balling out. Mike McDaniel was in his bag with his play calling. The Ravens defense, they gave a couple gifts, but hey, those happen and good teams take advantage of them. So I think we've seen what the Dolphins can be at their peak, and it's just a matter of how long they can sustain it. at average, at their just baseline level, yeah, they're probably a contender for one of those wild card spots. If they can maintain the peak for longer, then potentially challenge the Bills for the division, but definitely be much firmer in that wild card conversation. Maybe even steal a playoff game on the road kind of team. I think Tua has proven that he can run this offense adequately. I think while he's on his rookie contract, he's the perfect quarterback for the system. He's going to be able to distribute to his guys. As long as he's got a level platform to throw from, he's going to be able to hit them. They can create all that run after catch and score a bunch of touchdowns. Mike McDaniel seems to be a mastermind 2 games into his coaching career. So while he's on his rookie contract, I think he's much better than a lot of people give him credit for. The real question comes, and this was kind of the Baker Mayfield discussion, just other quarterbacks along this line, where once that contract comes up and you have to pay the guy, is Tua a $40 to $50 million guy? Because now you're having to start to sacrifice the weapons and what really happens there. So for this season, I think Dolphins are firmly in that playoff hunt. They have a very good chance to get a win today, just based off of all the injuries piling up for Buffalo, their offensive firepower, the pains that Tyreek Hill has given the Bills lately. But the future is still a question mark in terms of how high Tua can fly.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree in general. I'll touch on that in a minute. But what do you think, Vance? What do you think about the Dolphins so far?
I don't want to risk alienating all of Dolphins.
That's always the concern.
That was a very rough day on my end of things. I view the Dolphins and go back to this tweet. I view the Dolphins and Bengals very similarly in levels of talent. Obviously, the Dolphins are playing much better in 2022 than the Bengals are, but they have really great weapons. Maybe the second best receiver unit in the league, certainly top 3, depending on how you look at a couple of the other teams. They have a young quarterback who maybe not the most elite arm in the league. He's not Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert, but he is very accurate and can certainly make plays. They have a offensive line that has struggled in the past. They have improved this year, playing much better. And some of that's due to the coaching, which has figured out how to scheme these guys open and take advantage of the speed that the receivers have. And they have tons of that. I think they are a playoff team. I was kind of thinking this morning, actually, as I was preparing for the show, how the Bengals could actually slide into the playoffs. And I think that when I was figuring up who I'm pretty sure will be in the playoffs, I feel like 6 of the seeds are probably pretty well locked up, and I have the Dolphins in that group. Contend for the division, it's going to come down really to the continued health of the Bills. And we'll talk about that when we kind of talk about our picks for the games. The Bills secondary is going to have our hands full today. With Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and the Bills starting a bunch of rookies and guys who aren't the most experienced guys in the league. So it's interesting. Today's kind of a watershed game. If the Dolphins win this game, then I think they have a real shot at taking the division, depending on, of course, their own health. But I think they're a really good team. They seem to have an extra swagger about them. Some of that, the coaching staff certainly brings. They seem to know what they're doing out there with the play design and scheming the guys open. And I like what I've seen so far.
I think for me, and I tend to pretty much agree with you guys for the most part, I think this is going to ultimately be a playoff football team. But I think the thing that I'm curious to see for me today is, even with an injured secondary, even with everything the Bills have going on, can Tua overcome a pass rush that is much better than anything they've faced so far? And can he, when facing that pass rush, still deliver the ball accurately and on time? Because if you go back and watch that Ravens game, the thing that stood out to me is when Tua is on time, when he's confident, when he knows what he's looking at and he can fire the ball at the right time, he has enough arm talent to make a lot of the throws they're going to ask him to make in this offense. And especially if you blow coverages, he's a smart enough quarterback that he's going to find those guys, right? And we can talk about blown coverages and how it inflated his numbers. That's all well and good. He's still played fantastic by especially his standards so far in his career. And I think what I'm looking to see today is, can, even under that pressure, which I expect it to come, even with the secondary hurting, I think they're going to be able to get to him much better than any team he's played so far. Can he still provide that same confidence, the same accuracy, the same timing? If he can do that, I do think that there is a lot of holes that he can take advantage of in the secondary, obviously, and you could see another big game. But that's kind of my concern with Tua, is I don't think that he has the skill set or the arm talent to deal with pressure and still get his throws off where they need to be. And if he can't do that today, it's going to get ugly, I think, again. And it's been ugly when he's played them. I'm hard pressed to think that they're going to be able to do it even right now. I hope that they prove me wrong because I really like Tua. I've liked him since he was in college. I didn't have the highest view on him as a prospect by the time we got to that point, but I still loved watching him play. And I go back to watching him as a freshman and that throw he made in the national title game. Like, that's the type of throw that if he can continue to make throws like that, like he used to, he can be a starting quarterback, maybe long term for this team too. But I'm going to reserve judgment until at least after the next couple of games, probably this game more than anything. So. But before we jump into our picks for the games and go through all the games for week 3, I do want to touch a little bit, unfortunately, would rather not have to do this, but I want to touch a little bit on the Thursday night game, the recap for that game, 29-17, Browns over my Pittsburgh Steelers. Score was closer than it seemed. It was a weird play at the end that gave them an extra touchdown, but it was still pretty handily won by the Browns, in my opinion, especially in the second half. I'm going to start off, obviously, just because I want to get my 2 cents in here, but I want to hear what you guys have to think too. I've written multiple things about this over the past 2 weeks, but I think Mitch Trubisky needs to sit and Pickett needs to come out. That's the first thing I think that needs to change because that's something that Tomlin could change without really any backlash whatsoever. And also it'd be something that wouldn't be unprecedented because we've never really had to worry about putting a rookie quarterback in for, 20 plus years almost. So that's the first thing I think that needs to happen. And you could say that like Mitch isn't the biggest problem. He's not. I think it's the play calling and among other things. But he can't overcome that play calling. And he also isn't winning games, right? He's not playing winning football. And the whole reason you start the veteran over the first round rookie is because you hope that he can make you competitive. He can win you games. He can help you move things along and keep things going. If he can't do that even, and the offense can't score more than 2 touchdowns in a game, there's no point in continuing to play him because you're not going to be competitive and you're not going to get the rookie any time to gel and figure things out with this receiving core you've put together. So for me, that's the first thing is I look at that game and I say, Mitch just can't get it done with what he's being given play calling wise. I think Pickett is better suited to deal with those play calling issues. And then with the play calling, Matt Canada has to go. I don't care if it's next week. I don't care if it's the end of the season. Because it's going to be the end of the season. That's how the Steelers roll. They're not going to fire somebody midseason. It needs to be over at least by the end of this year. I already feel like this year, if they don't make a quarterback change and they don't get rid of Canada, it's already going to be a lost season for us. I just don't see how they can turn it around with the situation they have offensively. And with TJ Watt being out, the defense just doesn't have the same teeth it normally does. It simply doesn't. And you could tell that with the way the Browns dominated us physically. Those 2 things need to change before the Steelers are going to be able to be competitive again. And knowing this team and how they operate, I expect neither to get done for at least the next 6 weeks. So I want to see what Vance has to say about that.
Yeah, I think you touched on pretty much everything that I was thinking. I didn't really watch the game Thursday night because it just didn't seem like it was going to be the most exciting game ever.
No.
But I do, excuse me. I do agree that it's really time to start getting Pickett ready and getting him in the games. I like Pickett as a prospect, maybe a lot more than others. I didn't quite have him as a first round pick, but I can see why the Steelers would make him a first round pick. There was a lot to like about him, and so I think he got to get in the game. And this is not a knock on Trubisky, who hasn't played as badly as maybe you can go find Trubisky jokes on Twitter a dime a dozen. But he hasn't played terribly, but he's just not getting points on the board. And maybe Canada's a part of that, as far as play calling goes. But, it's going to come back on, sometimes the quarterback just has to make some plays. And he hasn't made a lot of negative plays, but he hasn't really made a lot of, plays that have really accomplished a lot either. And when your quarterback isn't as big a threat, suddenly your running game's not going anywhere. And now you've got Najee Harris averaging, 3 yards a carry, something around that anyway. So the entire Steelers identity is just being compromised by the offense up to this point, and it's they really are they're 1-2, right, record wise, and really if it wasn't for a injured long snapper would be 0-3 at this point.
Yeah,
and, that's not what Mike Tomlin wants to do. It's not what Mike Tomlin has done. He's always overcome adversity and managed to get this team. He said, he just doesn't have losing seasons, and they're staring down the barrel of one right now. That's not going to be acceptable to fans, and I think you're right. There's going to be changes. Maybe they hold out to the end of the year because, like the Bengals, the Steelers don't really like to do that kind of thing. But I think there's going to be some changes on the horizon, and I think they're necessary at this point. The franchise has got to go in a little bit different direction than what they're doing right now.
I totally agree. And anything you want to add, Tony, to that?
Yeah, I mean the game was like the Thursday night game from the previous week, or the week before that even. I do think, Trubisky, just like you said, Vance, he's not making like the terrible like LOL Trubisky plays. It's all the plays that he's not making that are just leaving throws on the table, not hitting guys when they're open. And so that offense is pretty anemic. And I think it has to do with the coordinator, it has to do with QB, it has to do with just everybody really. The defense without TJ Watt is just, it's good. It's just not exceptional. It's not game winning good like it previously had been. So this will be a tough season, I think. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see Pickett for a long time. Tomlin seems pretty committed to Trubisky. They've got a just gauntlet of a schedule pretty much throughout the entire season. So I think it could be where if things are really bad, we might see Pickett for the last few games. But other than that, I don't think he's going to get a chance to like supplant Trubisky as much as he deserves it.
Yeah, and just before we move on to our, getting into picks here, the thing I will add is that it seems like the bye week is the earliest they may make a change. And to me, if you wait till then, the season is over. I don't see us winning more than one or two of the next, 5 games or so before the bye week comes up. I think with Pickett, you have a shot in some of those that otherwise I wouldn't give us a shot. I mean, even if you have 10 days, right, from the Thursday game to get him ready to play the Jets if you wanted to. And I don't even think we'll beat the Jets if Trubisky starts. I just don't think we will. I think the Jets are a better football team right now on offense.
I believe they are getting Zach Wilson back for that game too.
Which I mean, even
might
if
be a boost to the Steelers, honestly.
Maybe depending on how he looks, but I mean, Flacco's looked pretty good for his standards for sure. So but the fact that a Joe Flacco-led Jets team is a better football team right now than my Steelers, that's all you need to know about the offense right now. So we'll just move on from that. But we're gonna start with our game of the week. Typically not going to be a 1 p.m. game, but I mean, this is definitely the game of the week. We're talking Buffalo, Miami, 2 teams that have started off so hot overall. Obviously, we just talked about Tua in that situation. I'm going to go with Tony here first. What do you got for score for me, and just any thoughts we didn't add from before?
Yeah, so just right off the bat with the score, I think Bills win in a shootout. I have 38-31. I think both teams clear the 30 mark. I think both teams are going to score with ease. I think you look at the matchups in this game, and so yeah, there are a ton of injuries on the Bills defensive side. There are also some injuries on the Dolphins. I know Xavier Howard's going to play, but he's been banged up. Raekwon Davis is not going to play. I think looking at the skill position specifically, both offenses have a huge advantage. So Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, massive advantage over 2 rookie cornerbacks and 2 safeties who have a combined start.
Yeah.
And then on the opposite side of the ball, you have Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis going against Miami secondary, who hasn't really looked up to their usual standard of play so far this year. So then you go to the trenches. And I think before the news of Mitch Morse being inactive, the Bills had a massive advantage on the offensive line versus the Dolphins defensive line. I think that lessens because losing your center is really, really painful. But with Raekwon Davis being out, still advantage to the Bills on the offensive line. Bills have the defensive line advantage, and that's where I think the win comes from. I think Von Miller, Greg Rousseau affect Tua enough where they lose a couple of drives, and it's going to be a kind of game where you need to score every drive. And then just we have 17. I hate to simplify it that much, but Josh Allen's an absolute superstar. He's played the best football in his career against the Dolphins routinely. That's just the team that he gets every single time. So he's going to be out there hungry. He's going to know that there's extra pressure on him because of those players being out. And so ultimately he gets the win. But I think the Dolphins prove that they fully belong. And it wouldn't surprise me to see that if they were to win this game either.
Absolutely. And what do you think, Vance?
Yeah, I think Tony pretty much nailed everything. Injuries on the Bills are going to affect them. You've got the 2 fastest receivers in the NFL versus a extremely inexperienced Bills secondary. I would assume the Bills will come up with a plan to try to minimize that somewhat. So, I think it's going to be a close game. I've got not quite the shootout Tony has. I've got Bills 28-27 in a close one, really a toss-up. If Tua gets hot, then and those receivers get loose, then it's going to be a long day for the Bills. But like he mentioned, Josh Allen is is really just playing so good. He's MVP right now. I know it's only 2 games in, but through 2 games, I think he's the MVP.
Yeah, and I agree with the Bills being the pick here. I do have them winning 28-21. I think it's going to be a little bit lower scoring to start the game a little bit as both teams kind of fill each other out a little bit. But then ultimately talent wins out. Josh Allen's a better player than anyone in the game outside, it's just what it is. And the fact that Tyreek Hill, I think he's going to make a play or two, obviously, but I don't think he's going to have the same impact and Waddle either that they did last week. It was just so many blown coverages and things like that. And I think that at the very least in this game, they're going to have to straight up beat the Bills secondary. It won't be really, even with the new guys in there, they're such a well-coached team, and McDermott's done such a great job since he's been there. I have a hard time thinking even the backups are going to blow coverages or do anything too bad. So they're going to have to earn it. And I think ultimately the pass rush wins them the game, and Allen's able to finish it off, and they go home with another victory. So moving on to a really fun game, especially considering the team that actually you thought it would be another team in this matchup, but it's actually the Lions and not the Vikings that I'm most interested by. Lions and Vikings playing today. What do you think, Vance?
Again, this one I had is really more of a toss-up. The Vikings looked really good week 1, not quite as good week 2. But I went ahead and took the Vikings 24-21. I think the Lions do still have, they're an up-and-coming team. Obviously, they've played really well, but I still think they have some things in it. I think Goff's going to have a golf game at some point. And I think this might be it. The Vikings have some talent on that team. I'm going to take the Vikings to maybe pull an upset here, but I guess maybe I look at the Lions.
What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I've got it similarly. I think it's a close game. I have the Vikings winning 28-24. I think we saw more of the real Vikings in week 1 than we did last week. We are all familiar with Monday Night Kirk. It is a different football player than his usual level of play. He gets his cushy 1 p.m. start at home in a dome. I think that's good for him. So the defenses are both pretty bust. Like they're not good. But I think that Justin Jefferson's going to have a big day, and the Lions offense will continue to look good, but just not get it done at the end.
Totally fair. I'm going with the Lions, and I'm probably gonna, outside of like really clear and obvious like no chance type of games, the Lions are gonna be my team. I'm picking a lot this year. I just believe in everything that they're doing, and also the biggest thing for me, I think that the Vikings interior is just squishy. They're just not the best defensive line in terms of run defense ever. And I think DeAndre Swift has been so ridiculously good to start the season, even in limited carries at times. I feel like they're going to just really run the ball down their throat, keep that offense off the field. Goff will do enough where he doesn't screw the game up, but he's going to make a couple throws that they need him to. And I think, honestly, it's going to be 27-24 Lions, and not a low-scoring game, but they're going to keep the Vikings offense off the field long enough and often enough that they can keep them below that 30-point threshold and get the win. So, but it'll be fun. It'll be a fun game to watch, I think, regardless. But moving on to Baltimore at New England, I have, with this game, so many questions about whether New England is actually going to even be able to do anything offensively, because even against the Steelers, they put up points, but it was off turnovers and a crazy play by Nelson Aguilar. Like, still did not really look good, even against a beaten up Steelers defense. What do you think here? Let's go with Tony here.
Yeah, I've got Baltimore winning 24-14. I think Baltimore is just an immensely more talented team. They are missing Ronnie Stanley, which hurts, but the Patriots don't really have much in terms of pass rush to challenge that. Lamar has been just really, really good, and I think he's probably hungry after that collapse last week. So I'll call like a Rashad Bateman touchdown if anybody wants to put money on that. But yeah, I think Baltimore is just a better team.
And what do you think, Vance?
Yeah, Baltimore is a much better team at this point. I have really no faith that the Patriots are going to win more than a couple games this year, and I don't know what they're really doing. I don't know what, like, I don't even know what their future holds for them at this point. I don't know what their direction is. I'm really confused with the Patriots. I've got the Ravens big, 34-20.
Makes sense. I have them winning 31-21, the Ravens today. I just think, again, everything you guys echoed, like, it's just they're way more talented. The Patriots make no sense to me. I think they'll score 21 points just because the secondary and everything else is beaten up, and look at a couple weird plays like the Dolphins got in the fourth quarter last week. But outside of that, the Ravens are just better in pretty much every facet of the game. Just feels like one of those games that even, Bill Belichick coach team can't really overcome. So we've seen worse, better New England teams get beat by, honestly, probably worse Ravens teams in the past since Lamar's been there. So, but moving on to New Orleans and Carolina. Yeah, that's this one could be one of the duds of the week. I feel like you have Jameis Winston with the back injury. You have just whatever the hell Carolina's got going on offensively. Still can't figure out what they want to try to do. Let's go back to Vance here. What do you think for this game?
Yeah, and like the Patriots, I don't really have a lot of faith in the Panthers. Apparently, the ownership does, as they gave the dreaded vote of confidence to Matt Rule. But I've got Saints 27-16. I just don't like where the Panthers are at right now. They're a mess.
Yeah, I tend to agree. What do you think here, Tony, for this one?
Yeah, so I'm going to end my streak of picking Carolina when they ultimately lose. I was really darn close to picking Carolina, but I think both teams are just kind of ugly right now. But the Saints, their defense will have a great day against the Carolina offense. And on the Matt Rule point, I'm going to call my shot now. I tweeted this out, but the 2025 Big Ten championship game, it's going to be Ohio State 54 and Matt Rule's Nebraska 10. So that's
fun.
what he's going to be.
Fun. I like that. Hey, they need what he's done in the past in college, at least right now for sure. So that'll be fun. Yeah, I'm going to go Saints 24-21. I think that their defense just ultimately wins it out. I think that their defense is more developed and farther along than the Panthers. And even a hurt Jameis Winston might be able to pilot a better offense than whatever it is that the coaching staff there in Carolina is coming up with right now. And like, I don't want to blame the players because everything I've seen kind of makes me think that it's more of like a Steelers offense situation where the play calling is so bad that you have to have a ridiculous quarterback and weapons to even have a chance to score 25 points. But again, I'm going to go with the defense with the Saints here with that win. This one could be also another snooze fest, depending on, how you feel about these teams right now. It's been rough to watch, these teams for the most part. We got Houston and Chicago. Let's go back to Tony here. What do you think for this one?
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun, ugly, where like it's bad,
it could be.
But you're going in with that expectation, and so there's just some funny plays, some interesting plays. I have Chicago winning 20-14. I think it's another really run-heavy game, and Justin Fields just boot touchdowns. I always predict those for him.
Fair enough. What do you think, Vance?
Yeah, I've got similar. I've got the Bears 21-17. I think Justin Fields is the difference in this one. Most talented player on the field, and probably by quite a bit. But yeah, the Texans are getting better, but they're still the Texans for now.
See, I'm taking it a little bit of a different approach because I have the Texans winning 21-17. I just feel like this coaching staff refuses to allow Justin Fields to play football the way that Justin Fields has always played football before he got in the NFL. And I think when you look at it, obviously the weaponry is certainly iffy outside of Darnell Mooney, but they haven't even used him or Cole Kmet, who we kind of thought might be the second best receiving option for them. It's pretty much just been David Montgomery trying his absolute hardest to carry the team down the field. The running game has been really good overall for the most part, especially last week, but it just hasn't led to points. And I think until they let Fields open things up and let him make decisions down the field, it's going to continue to be rough on offense. And believe it or not, and this is the thing that I think is crazy, is I think the Texans trust Davis Mills with the football in his hands way more than Bears trust Fields right now. Why? I couldn't really tell you that, but I think that's kind of going to be the difference. I think they're going to let Mills open things up and try to attack this, relatively young secondary and see what they can do. And I think it ultimately will lead to a win. But let's move to another game that could end up getting a little bit ugly, I think, especially the way that one of these teams has started off. We got Kansas City at Indianapolis. Let's go back to Vance here. What do you think for that one?
Yeah, I agree. This one could wind up a 2-3 score blowout type game. The Chiefs' offense has not looked like they've missed a beat, even though Tyreek Hill is no longer there. They're still putting up points, and the offense is moving the ball with relative ease, even against good teams like the Chargers. So I've got the Chiefs 31-24. I do think the Colts play a little better this week on offense and keep it relatively close. But yeah, I've got the Chiefs. I've got the Chiefs on this one.
And what do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I've got a little bit different. I've got Kansas City winning 45-10. So to back this up with a couple data points, like the most important thing in this game is Gus Bradley as the defensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts. Yes. He famously this week said that he felt that they did a great job of handling the Chiefs offense last year when he was with the Raiders. Want to bring up those scores. The first matchup at Las Vegas, the Chiefs won 41-14. He did not stop that offense. Then in December, when the Chiefs were at home, the Chiefs won 48-9. So He didn't stop that offense. He's going to roll out his cover 3 scheme, and it's going to get torn to shreds. He's giving Patrick Mahomes this game on a silver platter, and he's going to take advantage. And because of that, the Colts offense won't be able to lean on what they do well, which is run the ball. And so I don't think they're going to put up many points.
I think that's totally fair. I do think that that's a big factor in this game. I do have a little bit more conservative 31-21 score. I think that the Colts offense will be able to run the ball a little bit more early on in the game and be successful doing that. Just because I don't love the Chiefs' run defense, especially up front with their defensive line. But kind of like you said, this scheme that they're going to be running against the Chiefs just straight up does not work against them. And why Gus Bradley thought that, because I did hear that quote as well. Unless he's just trying to talk himself into like, we can do this, guys. Like it worked last year. I know it doesn't look like it, but they didn't have that easy. Like it just doesn't happen, Gus. Like you figure something else out. At least against it, you could play cover 3 70% of the time against every other team if you want to. If you come out and cover 3 in this game, just might as well go home, get on the bus to say we'll forfeit, take your 2-0 win, which I think is what happens if you forfeit in the NFL, and move on with your life. Like that's what you should probably do if you're going to do that. So we'll see if that is what happens. I have to assume it is what happens. And then we'll see, probably, like I said, 30 plus points, and Colts start, I guess, 1-2 would be what their record would be, which whatever, ties. Moving on. We got Philly at Washington. Philadelphia coming off of a huge game against the Vikings. Jalen Hurts looks like a completely different player, which I would have not predicted, even though I guess technically every shred of evidence probably told me I should think that because he gets better every year. But what do you think for this game? Let's start with Vance here again.
Yeah, the Jalen Hurts has been fantastic. The Eagles have been fantastic as a whole, even better than I thought. I kind of thought, and I think most people thought, that they would either be the leader of that division this season, or they would at least be a close second, depending on how you felt about Dallas. But they've exceeded, I think, even the most of the highest expectations, at least so far. The offense looks really good. I've got the Eagles 28, Commanders 19. I don't like what's happening in Washington. Carson Wentz isn't playing well, and there's probably plenty of blame to go around there. And who wants to root for Dan Snyder anyway?
100%. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, so I've got a bit of a closer game, high scoring game. I've got Philadelphia winning 31-27. I think, to Vance's point, Philadelphia is a much better team, and I just think they're going to put up a bunch of scores early. And then Carson Wentz has kind of done this thing so far this season where he's just in garbage time, stat padding, really. So I think because it's against the Eagles too, he'll probably be chucking it up bigger at the end of the game too to really try to close that gap. So I think he'll hit a couple home runs late, but it's going to be more of a blowout than the 31-27 score would imply.
I think it's totally fair. I'm going 27-23 Eagles. I think that this will be a closer game, almost in the same way that Tony said. I think that there will be a late score or two that kind of makes it look a little bit better. But again, the Eagles are just a better football team right now. Jalen Hurts is really on an MVP pace right now when you look at everything he's done from on the ground through the air. I mean, he so far, and I believe this is the case, he did have the interception last week that was off a drop ball, but he has yet to have a turnover-worthy play this year, which is something that's been a big issue for him so far for his first 2 years starting. He's a completely different player so far, and if he keeps it up, like we talked about it before, I already had this team as the division winner before the season started. I didn't trust Dallas as much without Dak in there for however many weeks, even though they did win the first game. Sorry, Vance, without him. I just don't see them catching them. I don't think they're as good of a football team, so I'm going to go with the Eagles then for sure. Moving on to, we'll start with Vance for this one again because of who we got up here. Cincinnati at the Jets. Obviously, some bad memories last year with this game for you, Vance, I know. Coupled with what we have going on right now with the Bengals, I'm really curious to hear what you think with this game.
I almost picked the Jets just to try to break some kind of jinx that I've got going because I picked them in the first 2 weeks. But at the risk of jinxing said team, I'm going to take Bengals in a low-scoring game. I think there's going to be a ton of field goals in this game until the Bengals show that they can figure out how to manufacture some offense. But I think they win a tight one, 19-16.
Okay, what do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I've got a bit more faith in the Bengals. I've got them winning 28-17. I think, kind of like I was saying earlier, the Jets don't have a Micah Parsons. They don't have a TJ Watt. I think the Bengals know that they're better than they've shown, and this might be kind of their statement of, hey, we're not fully out of this one yet.
Yeah, I think that's totally plausible. And I think it should be what happens. If I'm looking at this game and saying, listen, Bengals have to figure something out. This is their chance to do so. If they don't do it now, it might be too late, honestly, in an AFC like this. We talked about that earlier. But I'm taking the Jets 27-26. I just have this bad feeling for at least, for Bengals, not so much for me, but bad feeling for the Bengals that it's going to be 26-24 and they're going to do something stupid's going to happen. The Jets get a chance to go down and kick a field goal and they make it and they win the game. Something like that is going to happen.
It would not be the first time this year that has happened.
Exactly. And it just feels
Predicting
like
heartbreak. Love to
it
see
really,
it.
and that's, I mean, look at the first 2 weeks, right? Something like that's going to happen to somebody. And honestly, if it's going to happen to somebody, it kind of feels like it's going to be the Bengals right now because Browns already, beat me. So like, we don't beat the Steelers. They don't have to worry about it being them this time. I just think the Jets have something going on where like they're going to pull something out for whatever reason. If you want to call it like the Joe Flacco magic, which is a really terrible sentence for me to say right now in 2022, whatever the case may be, something's going to happen and it's going to affect the Bengals and there might be staring at 0-3. So we'll see what happens with that. But moving on to two teams that really struggled out the gate and not that surprising to me considering their situations, maybe more so with one of these teams. But we got the Raiders at Tennessee. What do you think for this one, Tony?
Yeah, I've got the Raiders winning 28-21. I think Derek Carr last week he did something pretty silly. Is he targeted Matt Collins like 12 times and Devontae Adams twice, and that's because the defense told them they're like, hey, we're going to leave a guy wide open so that you don't target the best receiver in football, and he's going to realize that mistake and just force feed Devontae Adams targets, and we know that's a winning formula. The Titans secondary is obviously just they just got torched by the Bills. I think they're very susceptible to being torched by just about anybody. So they're going to put up a lot of points. The Titans offense will probably look better. I think they're going to be able to run the ball better, but ultimately I think the Raiders win this one.
Fair enough. What do you think, Vance?
I've also got the Raiders 24-20. I think Derek Carr bounces back some, has a better week. Obviously, Devontae Adams is going to be more of the bigger part of the offense. And always should be a bigger part of the offense. Any game plan. This reminds me of a few years ago, the Bengals went into the playoffs, and I don't remember which playoff game it was. It was during the Dalton years, but they thought that a good game plan was to not target AJ Green and go to the other guys. That didn't work out. So get Devontae Adams the ball, let them play. The Raiders are a better team than they've looked so far. I think maybe not playoff wise, but they're better than they looked. And the Titans are a bit of a mess right now. And I will just pick the better quarterback in my opinion, and that's Carr. So 24-20 Raiders.
Again, I can't really go against anything you guys said, but again, I'm taking the Titans in this one, 24-21. I have a feeling that Derrick Henry is going to have his Derrick Henry game, right? It's going to be this week. And Ryan Tannehill understands that his job is at stake right now because the way that things have gone so far. I even tweeted about this, and I don't know if you saw it, Tony, or if it was another Bills fan that saw it, but the last start that Ryan Tannehill had as a Dolphin was against the Bills, where he threw 2 picks and lost the game. Last week, he throws 2 picks, loses to the Bills, gets benched in that game, or at least taken out for the rookie quarterback. Now, obviously, if he's going to be back in there this week, that's not going to be a thing that you have to worry about right now. But he understands his job could be at risk, and the Bills might have a hand in ending 2 different starting careers for him for 2 different teams. I think he's going to come out and try to prove that he is a starter for at least right now. And I think that they'll get it done against a Raiders team that, again, just feels like they haven't figured it out yet. And missing Hunter Renfrow is not going to help with the concussion. That's something I think is going to affect Carr a lot. He really likes to target him, obviously, as well. Going to be fun to see what happens with that, though. But a game that, again, this next one is really hard for me to figure out because of certain player and dealing with the rib injury. But we have Jacksonville at Los Angeles with the Chargers here. What do you guys think Herbert's going to be able to play well even with the rib injury? Do we think it's going to become a problem? Let's start with Tony here.
Yeah, I'm just going to go out there and say Herbert's not playing today. I obviously don't have any inside info or anything, but the sports books don't lie, and they went from 7-point favorites to 3.5-point favorites. Their implied team total went from 28 to 23.5. Vegas doesn't think that Herbert's playing. And if they do think that he's playing, they think that he's a shell of himself. He's going to try to get that pain injection, and we see what happens with that in Los Angeles. It ends up with a punctured lung. So I think Jacksonville is a good enough team to beat Chase Daniels. And so I have them winning 24-21 and really taking a stranglehold of their division.
Okay, what do you think, Vance?
I kind of chuckled earlier because I saw a tweet. The Chargers made a point of saying that they were doing an injection with an ultrasound.
Yes,
and,
with an ultrasound machine. And
they're taking very much pains to make sure that they don't have a repeat. I don't know if he's going to play. I think he obviously wants to play. We saw him make a couple of ridiculous throws last week with the rib injury. So I think he might give it a go. I think he might start, and then they'll kind of play it from there. I do like the Chargers 27-21, but I would like them more if I knew for sure that Herbert was healthy.
I'm going to once again paint a bit of a picture for you guys for this game. I have a feeling, as I've said multiple times, Herbert's going to come out in the first half, and he's going to try to play. And it's going to go okay, but the pain becomes too much. He can't move well enough. He doesn't feel like he can run the offense well enough to continue playing. It's going to be like 14-14 at halftime. And he says, you know what, coach, I don't think I can run the offense properly. Let's let Daniel get in there and see what he can do. And for some inexplicable reason, a man who's not played very much football in his career, but was paid very handsomely to not play football for a long time, comes out and just has a game in the second half for no apparent reason. I feel like that's going to be the weird thing that happens this week outside of maybe the Jets situation. I said it before. And he's going to throw like 3, touchdowns or 2 touchdowns in the second half, and they end up winning 34-24 is my final score. I think that score might happen regardless of how it plays out, but I would love it if it happened that way. I think that'd be very funny. So we'll move on to the next game, though. Another game that I don't know how many people are interested in, honestly. I know I'm not particularly interested in it, but we have to talk about, obviously. We have Atlanta going to Seattle. What do you guys think for this one? Let's go back to Vance here.
Yeah, I think we talked about duds earlier, and I think this is very strong candidate for that. I've got Falcons 21-19, just as a sort of as Shane would call it, a feeling. But I don't really care.
What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I've also got the Falcons winning 23-17. I think this is the get right game for Kyle Pitts. I think Arthur Smith really clapped back at reporters last week for suggesting that they should, target their best player. So I think he's gonna publicly he like yelled back at the reporters, but internally he's like, yeah, shit, they're right. So I think it's gonna be the Kyle Pitts game, and their offense is just better.
Yeah, I want to take a quick second. I don't want to take too long with this game especially. But as a Kyle Pitts fantasy owner, I'm looking at Arthur Smith right now, and I'd like to understand his comment about, well, we're not playing fantasy football. We're trying to win games. You haven't won a game, Arthur. Your best player isn't affecting anything, and you're having him block all the time, which guess what? He's a 6'6" mega freak athlete who can play X receiver. Stop it. Throw him the football. Tell Marcus, listen, you're going to throw him the football, or Desmond Ridder can come in and throw him the football. Like that's where I'm at with it. If you don't want to throw him the football, then guess what? You're not going to play because he's their best player. I don't care. Drake London's a good rookie receiver. I think he has some nice things about him. They can coexist because one is basically a big slot receiver and the other one can literally play X receiver at 6'6", 240 pounds. Figure it out. That's all I'm going to say. But I do have them winning 24-20 with hopefully 3 Kyle Pitts touchdowns. That's what I am hoping for. But I'm not going to think about that too much. I'll get upset. We're going to move on to the Rams at Cardinals. 2 teams that are just having a weird season so far, I think, because you look at the Rams week 1, and they look like a team that shouldn't even be in the conversation for a playoff spot. Week 2, they almost give it up to the Falcons in 28-3 style, ironically. So that was another thing that kind of concerns me. And then you have the Cardinals, who maybe have the worst defense in the NFL, and also Kyler Murray can just make wild stuff happen as he did to win them that game. How do you see this going, guys? I'm going to go back to Vance here.
Yeah, the Cardinals. It's the Kyler Murray show, especially with the injuries that they've got on offense, and they're he's resurrecting AJ Green.
Yeah.
Made a nice play, obviously. I've got the Rams, but I don't really have a lot of faith in the Rams. They are inexplicably playing poorly. I don't know how to analyze the Rams, but they should win with the matchup. So I'm just going to go ahead and I've got 30-24 Rams, but I don't really have a ton of faith in that at this point.
Yeah, what do you think, Tony? It's kind of same line of thinking, or?
Yeah, so I do have the Rams 31-20. I think the Rams have been incredibly disappointing, but I do think that they are better. And the Cardinals, I mean, if it weren't for cardiac Kyler coming out in the final quarter and overtime of that game, then we're talking about a full on collapse and Cliff Kingsbury being out within the next few weeks. I don't think he's doing that team any favors, and you can't get that lucky. You can't have a quarterback with those tiny little legs running 85 yards just to score a 2-point conversion. It's not going to happen every week. So maybe, I mean, that's what it's going to take for them to win games is Kyler just going full, just zero dark Kyler, I guess. I was trying to make a Call of Duty reference, but I couldn't think of one.
Yeah. I do have the Rams winning 31-27, but again, you look at the Rams offense right now, it seems so out of sorts. I think McVay is trying to figure out how to do different things than last year so teams can't key on what they did last year. It's what made him so successful the past couple of years is he adjusts pretty heavily from year to year. I think they might want to just kind of get back to what they were doing more of last year. And I know Cup has still been a huge part of things, but in the way that they're doing things, trying to get Allen Robinson involved, this is going to be important as well after his week 1 showing, especially. Week 2 is a little bit better, but I do think they'll still win. But first of all, I just want to say that Cliff Kingsbury is a fraud. I don't understand the point with him at this point because he doesn't bring anything to the offense or the defense because it's basically like you guys said, Kyler, go figure it out. You're my quarterback. I've loved you forever since high school, wanted you on my football team. And he got him. And instead of trying to maximize him or try to build his game up or change how he's playing and make him more adaptable to things, he's just like, go out there and run around. We'll put the funny music on in the background while you do it so everybody can have a good laugh, and you go out there and make plays. And it's worked well enough in the past couple of years, but it's getting to a point where it's not working anymore as consistently, and the talent just isn't around them right now. So, but I'm going to still say Rams just kind of out-talent them, and they get the victory there.
If somebody doesn't make a video of Kyler Murray running to the Benny Hill song in the background now, I'm going to be disappointed.
Yes, I think I've seen that possibly at some point, so it might exist already. But yeah, if not, someone get on that. But okay, moving on to a game that I want to be excited for, but like I just can't get excited for because I feel like it's going to be ugly as all get out. Green Bay going to Tampa Bay. Aaron Rodgers just can't seem to beat Tampa for whatever number of reasons. I mean, their defense is fantastic, has been for a couple of years now, but still just kind of weird blind spot with him. How do you guys see this game going? Let's go back to Vance here.
I've got a feeling.
Okay.
To quote my co-host here, I've got Packers 27, Bucks 23.
Ooh, okay. Okay.
I think it'll be close. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to make just a couple of plays that make us remember Aaron Rodgers the from 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever you look at. I think he's just going to make some kind of play that propels them to a win. I think that's probably unlikely, but I'm going to go with it anyway.
All right, fair enough. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I think this is going to fall in the duds column when we're looking back at it. Both of these teams don't have any skill position players healthy. They're both going to the bottom of the barrel in that.
Still with us, Tony?
Wi-Fi issues have struck.
Yeah, he might have finally froze on us. I think he's froze a couple times for a second, but we'll come back to Tony if he can get back in here. But I'll just kind of jump in here with Green Bay, Tampa Bay. I look at this team, at both of these teams right now offensively, and I just don't see any sort of firepower because of the injuries / lack of talent with Green Bay. Like it feels like neither team has anything figured out offensively so far to start the year outside of week 1 with Tampa Bay just running the football down Dallas's throats. That's really the only thing they've done well so far. And obviously you play the Saints, you play the Cowboys, not the easiest matchups defensively, but it just doesn't feel like either team is figured out. And with Green Bay, the receivers are just not good right now. They're not, I don't think they're going to be great at any point. So Rodgers is going to have to make stuff happen and figure it out. So Yeah. Hopefully Tony can rejoin us here in a minute. But let's move on to. Well, I should say 21-20 is my score. By the way, Bucks. I'm
Oh,
going to kind of kick a field goal probably late and win it, just like Tom always does. He'll get a drive to win the game. So, moving on to San Francisco at Denver. Two teams that are dealing with one in case quarterback issues, where now you have Jimmy Garoppolo coming back in after the really tragic injury to Trey Lance, and then you have Russell Wilson, who just hasn't figured it out so far. And we have our third guy back here. Tony's back here. You
Sorry
doing all
about
right,
that.
Tony? Yeah, I saw that. But I gave my Tampa Bay Green Bay prediction. You want to give yours real quick before we get going?
Yeah, so I've got Tampa Bay winning 17-13. Just going to
Okay.
be really ugly offense.
Yeah, that's pretty much, we kind of echoed that sentiment, so we're good there. We're talking about San Francisco and Denver right now. Like I said, Trey Lance injury really kind of hurting things for San Francisco. I think it really limits their ceiling. I think obviously we know what you're going to get out of Garoppolo, so that's nice to have him there, but it does limit things a little bit. And then Denver just can't figure out things offensively so far through 2 games, which I thought would be the least of their problems. But what do you think here, Tony?
Yeah, so I've got San Francisco winning 27-20. I think that the Jimmy G offense will be smoother than the Lance offense had been. Like you said, the ceiling is capped now, but we know that this offense can perform well, and that it's against Russell Wilson. They're going to be a little amped up.
Yeah, I think so too. So what do you think, Vance?
I went Broncos actually 24-21. I think Russell Wilson is inevitable at some point. He's still a good player. And maybe not the Russell Wilson from a few years ago, but I think he's good enough to get them a few wins. I don't know. I think there was a lot of playoff predictions for the Broncos and a lot of Broncos fans who really thought that he was going to take them to another level. I don't know that they are going to manage that now. Sorry, Sophia. But I think they can win some games, and I think this is one of them. It'll be a tight game either way. I've got 24-21.
Yeah, I think I could definitely see that. I'm going to take Niners 24-17. I just have a feeling that the Niners defense is going to be amped up. And like Tony said, to play Russell Wilson, again, I think that the offense is going to move the ball consistently, just not very explosively for the most part, outside of maybe, Debo making a huge play or something like that. But I think they're going to move the ball a lot, keep the ball out of Wilson's hands. And when he does have the ball, I think they're still a couple weeks away from really truly figuring things out offensively. So I'm going to go like it's a 24-17 Niners for that. And then the last game of the week, another potential big time dud, of course, in prime time figures. Obviously having, Dak Prescott in here for Dallas would be nice, but we have Dallas at New York Giants here. The Giants are 2-0. It's pretty fraudulent 2-0 if I had to pick a team that's 2-0 to be kind of fraudulent, but they're 2-0, so you can't really argue with that. So far they are playing a Dallas team without Dak Prescott. What are we thinking for this one, guys? Let's go back to Vance here.
This is really literally a coin toss. I've got Giants 21-20. I think they managed to get to 3-0. They're going to ride Saquon as much as possible and try to keep Daniel Jones from fumbling or throwing the ball away. And the game, thusly, if they can even remotely block Micah Parsons, then they have the advantage quarterback-wise, even is maybe not top 10-ish as Daniel Jones is. But I think that they managed the 3-0.
Yeah, totally understand that. What do you think, Tony?
I also have the Giants rising to the most fraudulent 3-0 team of all time. I think they're just it's weird, but they get a very vulnerable Dallas team. I think Dallas used up its one Cooper Rush win against the Bengals last week. Micah Parsons will wreak havoc, so I've got the Giants 17-14.
Totally makes sense, and I'm going to go Giants as well. So we're going to have the ultimate 3-0 fraudulent pick here.
Congratulations, Cowboys!
Right? Yeah,
right.
Seriously, but for me, I just think the Giants are really well coached, and weirdly enough, despite their success past couple of years, I think that the Cowboys are not well coached with Mike McCarthy. So I think that Dable's going to dial up a couple things that end up getting them the edge. I'm going to pick Giants 20-17. Again, you kind of said it, Tony. I think that their one Cooper Rush win might have been weirdly enough against the Bengals. Maybe they can win another one or so, but just kind of feel like the Giants are going to keep the hot start going, if you want to call it a hot start. And eventually they will run into a wall that is like a good football team that they can't beat. But 3-0 to start your career, if you're Brian Dable's, obviously the best case scenario you could possibly imagine. So good for him. But that'll do it for us this week. We will start. I'm going to make sure that we try to just get a running tally of our picks throughout the year, just to see how bad or good we are. Probably not great to start the season because of how crazy the week 1 and 2 games have been, but we'll get that going. But for now, thank you guys for joining us, joining me today, Tony and Vance. We'll see you guys next week. And hopefully, we didn't have Adam last week. Hopefully he'll be here next week. And just a heads up, Tony did let us know that he will not be here, so you may see a new face on the team as well next week. But that'll do it for us at the ATB NFL Live show. You guys have a great rest of your week.